relationship. But the most important area in their studies was analyzing how the upbringing of the child begins from the womb of the mother. A very important area for the Shia especially. Why? Because for the Shia, we find that many of us have an idea that we should bring up our children when? We bring up our children from the age of 4, or 7, or 15, or 20. In some cases, some parents just don't even bring up their children. You find here that in the Shia world, there needs to be an understanding which psychology has already looked at, but which Al-Muhammad had looked at even before. Why? Because they've done a series of studies to see how the child from the womb of the mother is already learning. From the womb, the child is already learning. That there was the story which you've all heard and which I've recited before in my lectures. You've heard the story, the cat in the hat. Cat in the hat? Yeah? Dr. Seuss, the cat in the hat. So what happens is that they've done an experiment. And with this experiment, what did they do? They came forward with the child being in the womb of the mother. This child, in the womb of the mother, was able to hear a series of the cat in the hat. So imagine you're playing the cat in the hat at home, you're pregnant as a mother, the child is listening. When the child is born, of course there was another group, which was the test group, which was a group who were listening to any other story. And what happened was that this child, when it was born, it was given a baby bottle of milk. It had to suckle on that bottle, and the bottle was connected to a tape recorder, which would automatically go on as soon as the suckling began. What happened was, whenever the child would hear the story of the cat in the hat, it would suckle much more on that particular bottle than on any other bottle. Because it found what? It found that the words were something it was understanding. Imagine that. A child in the womb of the mother from what? 4, 5, 6 months is recognizing the sounds of the cat in the hat. That it would even reject the other bottle of milk. It would just continue on what? It would just simply continue on the cat in the hat. In an even more famous experiment, and an even favorite one of mine, I always like this one. There was one about, you know, the Australian soap Neighbours. Neighbours, anyone seen Neighbours, Home and Away? These are Australian soaps. And what happened was, a lady, her child would not stop crying. Her child would not stop crying. The mother went to the doctor, said, "Doctor, I've got a problem." "What's your problem?" "The child will not stop crying." Doctor's thinking to himself, "Yeah, I've got a long day and this lady is coming to me telling me the child wouldn't stop crying." So he says to her, "Look, this is normal." She says, "No, I'm telling you, the child just does not stop crying." And of course, for a mother, when her child doesn't stop crying, it is very difficult. It's the worst feeling inside any mother when the child doesn't stop crying. Especially when there is no milk to give, because there is no food to be given. It is very difficult. So what happens is the mother says, "Please, just give me something." What does the doctor say? He says, "When you were pregnant with your child, what program did you use to watch the most?" So the mother said, Neighbours, and Neighbours used to come on at 1:30 and at 5:30. It used to have 2 slots. You know, sometimes these sitcoms, they have like 2 slots, one in the morning, after, and so on. So she said, "I used to watch it." He said, "Okay, whenever your child starts crying, I want you to do one thing. I want you to come forward and play the theme tune of Neighbours. Neighbours, Neighbours, everybody has good neighbours with little understanding." This used to be the theme tune of Neighbours. So what happened was, as soon as the child would start crying, the mother straight away plays the theme tune of Neighbours. Child stops crying. Again the child starts crying. The mother again comes forward, plays it, child stops crying. Mother comes back. Now this doctor must be the talk of the town, because this doctor is now like a miracle worker. He can stop a child from crying. So she comes to him, she says, "Doctor, how did you do this?" He says, "It's simple. The child learns from the womb of the mother. When the child is in the womb of the mother, the child is already learning. That's why if I have Nancy and I have Haifa and I have Nawal and I have all of them at home with loud music coming out, do you think the one in there is going to come out as a scholar? What are you hoping for? Which dream? Are we wrong? Are we wrong or no?" Shia, mashallah, very good at listening to these things. Why? Because of course Arabic music's no problem. But English, that's the problem. Arabic, no, that's fine. Even if she's wearing less than the English or the American singer, no problem. She's giving me a nice message. She's giving me a message about love of my country and rubbish along those lines. So you find here what? You find that if you're listening to these things, there's going to be an effect without a shadow of doubt. Let alone those who listen P. Diddy and Sean Paul and things like that. I can't even imagine what then comes out after that one. What happens here, brothers and sisters, what happens is that we find that the learning takes place here. Allama Tabatabai narrates the story. What does he say? He says that there is an incident he always remembers, that there was an American family who had a child who wasn't the brightest. The child has problems, disability problems. He says the American family had a child, wasn't the brightest child in the world, had disability problems. So he says what happened was that this child, at about the age of 30, all of a sudden started saying a French lullaby. In French. The child can just about speak American. Now, it suddenly comes out, all of a sudden, saying a few words in French. So, they say they went and asked, what exactly is the reason? And they found out that the mother, she was pregnant with her child during the war, when the French had come towards the country. And that the child, from the womb of the mother, had heard this lullaby and had learnt it from the womb of the mother. That's why we find that the young boy, Tabatabai, you know that miracle boy from Iran, the one who knew the whole Quran and everything that came with it, we found that this young boy, they asked his mother, how exactly did you get a child who is able to come out with the Quran at such a young age? And she said, it's very simple. Of course, number one, it's a blessing from God. And she said, number two, me and my husband would read Quran all the time around the child when I was pregnant. Therefore, the child becomes so accustomed to the Quran that you found what? That you found that the child easily learned the Quran. And I remember hearing that when this child comes and the journalists are asking him questions, the journalists come to ask him questions, this child, as you know, only repeats by Quran. Journalist comes, asks him a question, what do you think of us journalists? Are we doing well in our life or no? What's the advice you give us? He replies Quranically by saying, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyanu. Look at the reply. A young child, if an evil, what he says, oh you who believe, if an evil man comes to you with news, verify the news. Look, from a young age he's giving journalists the best verse in the Quran you could ever give to any journalist, or to anyone for that matter. So you find here the effect of the womb of the mother. That's why Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, when she was pregnant with Aba Abdullah, she was known to have spoken to Aba Abdullah while pregnant. On the first day she is pregnant, Rasulullah is called. Rasulullah is told, Ya Rasulullah, come towards Fatima. Why? Fatima is crying. What's wrong? Rasulullah comes, he says, Fatima, what is wrong? She says, هذا الحسين يكلمني. هذا الحسين يخاطبني. This Hussein speaks to me. This Hussein, he consults me. What does he say? She says, يقول أنا الغريب. I am the stranger. The next day, same. What does he say? أنا العطشان. Third day, what? أنا الشهيد. So he speaks to his mother from the womb with the idea that what happens is, in the battle of Jamal, when Amir al-Mu'mineen comes forward, he speaks to his son Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. Muhammad ibn Hanafiyyah, he was what? He was regarded by who as one of the great scholars and one of the followers of Al-Muhammad. He was the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen from a different wife. He tells him, Muhammad, when you go out on the battlefield, go out and do not fear the arrows. Remain strong in your position. Remain firm in your understanding. Muhammad ibn Hanafiyyah goes out and then he returns back to his father. He says, Father, the arrows are coming too thick and fast. I am finding it hard to cope. His father is narrated to have said what? He says, that is the difference between all sons and the sons of Fatima al-Zahra. That he says every other mother can produce normal sons. But Fatima's sons, when they go through a battlefield, they do not fear any arrows. They steamroll through the whole army. And that's why you see, that's the effect of a mother. How much a mother can build a nation. That's why we find that Amir al-Mu'mineen, when Fatima al-Zahra dies, what's the first thing he does? He tells Aqil, find me a mother who will bring me what? Bring me warriors in Karbala. Why? Because from a mother or from a wife, you could tell from her family tree that there is going to be an effect. Even in the genetics, when you look for a wife, ask about the family around them. Although it doesn't necessarily mean that the girl comes out the same, but there is an effect without a shadow of doubt. And that's why you will find al-Baneen, the first message of respect that al-Baneen came out with was what? al-Baneen came out with a beautiful message. She said, change my name from Fatima to al-Baneen. Why? She says, Amir al-Mu'mineen, whenever you hear the name Fatima, you begin to cry. I prefer if you change the name. So if the name is changed as what? Al-Baneen. From her came 4 sons in Karbala. Look at that. a mother can produce 4 sons who can come in Karbala and change the whole course of Islamic history. And this al-Baneen, do you know what her greatness is? That she never cried for her sons when the caravan returned. She didn't even cry. They said to her, Abbas has passed away. She says, tell me about Aba Abdullah. They tell her Ja'far, they tell Abdullah, they tell Uthman, they tell her they've all passed away. She says, just tell me about Aba Abdullah. Later on, when Imam Zayn al-Abidin comes to see her, he says, I hear you don't cry about Abu Fadl. Do you know what she replies? She says, I don't cry about Abu Fadl because I do not believe that my Abu Fadl would not have stayed with Aba Abdullah. Look at that level. He always promised me he would remain with Aba Abdullah. Imam Zayn al-Abidin says, I explained to her what happened. She said, Wallah, the reason I didn't cry about Abu Fadl was because Aba Abdullah's mother was not there to cry for him. So I had to be there crying for him, but I know his mother will cry for Abu Fadl on the Day of Judgment. So here you find the importance of the mother. Likewise, we find in Karbala, Wahab, his mother, when Umar bin Sa'ad picks up Wahab's head, she used to be a Christian. She became a Muslim. When Umar bin Sa'ad picks up Wahab's head, he throws it at his mother. Says, take him. Do you know what she replies? Takes the head and throws it back. Says, you have